welcome to the Lighten Up podcast with Lauren Polly, your invitation for living on the lighter side of life. I am Lauren Polly, and I am delighted you have chosen to join me today for episode 190. Our voice has power, and so to speak, your voice has power. This is always a constant aha in my world. So many of us feel like we don't really have a voice. We don't really have a creative influence on the people around us. And sometimes we don't have that self-advocacy voice to actually speak what it is we believe and what it is we'd like to see in our life and our living. Today I was being interviewed on a wonderful podcast with a new friend, and comes from a very different background than I do. He's an educator, and in his past he's got some mental health upsets, and one of his loves, like mine is this idea of having greater conversations about mental health and destigmatizing it, giving people language to connect and express themselves with more. And it was a beautiful conversation. We were talking about this, that, and the other, and at the end of it, after we had stopped recording, he said, "This is amazing. This is just what I would like." And he said, truly, what I would like more than anything is to have a sweeping change in the realm of this, how the world views it and how we handle it. And he says, "Oh, I just really wonder, like, how is that going to happen? It just seems so big. It's such a big ask." And I just kind of giggled and I said, "Look, we're doing it right now. This is it. This is having people who are caring about the subject, who feel impassioned and empowered by it, speaking up and using their voice to touch the people they're already connected with, using new platforms to reach more people, joining our voices together to be able to bring different perspectives and open up the conversation deeper. This is how change will occur, and this is how you start creating the change that you'd like to see in the world." It was just kind of a fascinating thing, and it just hit me and struck me to such a depth of how often we feel like, one, we're not talking to anyone, kind of like speaking into the void, so to speak. I've had that experience many, many times. I know you all have too. And sometimes speaking and just going, wow, like no one is listening, no one cares, no one's really receiving what I'm saying, or there aren't people to really speak with. And I think it's such an interesting perspective to have on the world. And for me, what lies at the heart of that is us not really taking ownership of our creative power and the power that our voices do have when we stand and when we speak. And it doesn't have to be a grand, big thing like, this man and I were talking about changing the perspective on mental health. Perhaps it's something different for you. But even in our personal relationships, even in our work environments, even in our own self-dialogue, to be able to change the conversation and to really utilize our voice, our inner voice and our physical voice, our creative voice in the world in a way that actually creates a reality that we desire is something huge. It's also accessible to all of us. And I just find it fascinating and also quite a bit sad that so many of us have lost the power of our voice. Either we have spoken before and it wasn't received or heard, or like I said, it feels like you're speaking into a void and what you're creating really isn't going anywhere. But we all have those experiences. The most important thing is to just continue to go and to go and to go. And every time you have a conversation with yourself in your own world, every time you have a personal conversation, a business conversation, every time you get up on a platform and perhaps reach new people, that is you being the power of change in the world. It is something so fascinating that we think that we can't actually have the reality that we desire, or what we desire is so different and seems so far away from where people function currently. But just take this mental health example. When I was first diagnosed, and if you read my multi-award winning book, The Other Side of Bipolar, you know this. When I was diagnosed back in the 90s, alternative practices weren't spoken about. No one knew what holistic care was. It was just medicate and do traditional therapy. That was quite limitation based. There was just so much stigma around the whole topic that no one actually did speak up. You hid it and you tried to mask over it as best you could to get by. In the years as they've gone by and as I've kind of perked my ears up and got my eyes wide open and started speaking myself, I started to look at where the conversation in society has gone. And not just over the past couple of years, but it's been kind of a rolling conversation I've noticed where more people are talking about holistic practices. More people are talking about alternative practices. There's more people stepping forward to saying, you know what, I struggle too. There's more celebrities owning up to it. There's more doctors speaking up about the need of more care. There is a growing tide changing in that realm. And though it may sound grandiose to some, I know that the ripples in the world I've contributed to. My willingness to change the conversation in myself, to actually change the conversation about how I view myself in relation to this topic, to start creating things to allow other people to change the conversation with themselves, and to step up to other platforms and bigger voice in the world has created a ripple out that's helped this change. I'm not the only one who's done that. There are many people from all walks of life with all different backgrounds who have been doing the same thing. Guess what? Our collective voices have joined, those collective energies have resonated greater, and now there's more openings to have these conversations. This is the way it works. This is the way the universe and consciousness works. The more people who are really being clear and honest and vulnerable and have the conversation first with themselves, changes it in their own inner dialogue, changes it in their own personal relationships, and starts to create bigger circles from there. All of the different people doing that, they all have power in their voice, and those voices, when collected, do create change. Now, I'm just using this as an example because this is something from my life that I had a big aha on today when I was interviewed. But please look for yourself. Let's start here. First and foremost, what is the change you'd like to see in the world? And it doesn't have to be something huge, like, oh, I'd like the mental health world to change, or, I'd like everyone to become conscious. It could be, I'd like there to be more of a sense of space. I'd like people to be more playful and fun. I'd like there to be more kindness in personal interactions. Whatever that is, whatever kind of change would actually light you up and make you happier to be here, just know that. Then kind of work yourself backwards. How can you bring about that change first in your own world? Don't even go to the relationships you have and trying to change other people. That never works. You can't change anybody. Go to where you can affect change. Change it in yourself. What are the different conversations and how can you use your internal voice and claim the creative power of that to start to change the dialogue for you? How you see yourself, how you see the world, how you engage with the world. Whatever ideas come to you, jot them down and start to explore that. What you'll notice with that, when you start to change the conversation in of yourself, those possibilities become more actualized reality. They become easier for you to choose moment to moment. And then a magical thing occurs. That change in you, your different perspective and your different choices has a rippling effect to those around you. Before you know it, those changes will start to bleed over into your personal and professional relationships. You can put more conscious action into that by actually going, okay, I've changed it within my own inner dialogue. Now, how can I actually utilize my voice to speak up for myself? To create with the people in my life, to change the dynamics of my relationships, how I show up in the work environment. Perhaps there's a messaging change in my business. Perhaps there's a creative pursuit that suits this. If you've been playing along those lines for a while, start to look at what different and bigger audience you could reach. It's almost like these beautiful concentric circles that start to pulsate and radiate out. This is how you grow about a movement. This is how you actually generate a creative conversation that creates more consciousness in the world. So often what we do is we say, oh my goodness, I like this big change, but it's so big, I don't know how, and I stop myself. Or we go, wow, I'd really like this in the world. And the way to do this is start to yap in my mouth to anybody who will listen and pushing your way onto stage to try to megaphone it out. But the thing with that is, if you haven't had the internal conversation first, if you haven't owned it for yourself, if you haven't chosen it for yourself and actually enjoyed it and lived it and allowed it to radiate from there, it's going to be quite hard to sustain, and it's always going to have a hint of inauthenticity. It's not going to be congruent with your being. Where does the change occur? The change you'd like to see in the world, the change you'd like to see in your life. Well, it starts with you, your inner dialogue, and how you see yourself in relation to the world. From there, start to actually explore how you can use your voice this way, how you can advocate for yourself and what you like, the different ways you would interact with people based on this. And then grow and grow and grow from there. And I wonder, the more you push that growing edge, the more you claim it for yourself, the more you shine it out to others, the more you teach by example, not by lessons, but by example, the more ripple effect you'll have in the world. And keep your eyes and your ears open. Who out there is creating something similar? Who out there is interested in the same ideas, the same energies, the same possibilities that you are? Even if they're not from the same background, even if they're not using the same language, even if you guys never connect, is there a way that your two voices being heard in the world will join together some way to create more change? And perhaps reaching out to people to have more of these creative verbal conversations would be fun for you. It's always surprising to me being in kind of an insular bubble that we love to go into, thinking you're the only one creating this, or you're the only one interested, or you're the only one speaking to it. Having conversations with people from different walks of life who are talking about the same thing, using different languages, absolutely, using it in their own way, coming at it from a different angle, but there are some similarities there. What would it take to actually start to join your voices together to create more of a mass movement, if that's what you desire? So often we want to change in the world, but we don't create the change in ourselves first. And isn't that interesting and funny? Because truly living your best life and living a life that lights you up more than anything, guess what? If you don't include yourself and you don't let your own living actually be that, what's the point? Perhaps it's not starting at the macrocosm, change in the world, so you can first have it for you. Perhaps it's time to flip it, the microcosm of your own universe, your inner dialogue, your personal relationships. Having it there is such important work. And from there, shining it out, extending it into the world is going to be something you don't even really have to think about, just something that naturally occurs. These conversations, the powers that we have in our voice, our inner dialogue, our physical voice, our creative voice, all of that is huge, and it's an untapped resource. If you've been looking for a lighter living, I just invite you to explore this. Start with you. Start with your inner dialogue. Start with how you're engaging with the elements of your life. Then start to notice how you can change the interactions you have with the people in your life. Then, if you're so bold and you're so inclined, start to look at the conversations you can be leading with an audience and growing from there. None of it is necessary and none of it even is needed. It's just your choice on how big you want to go with it. And perhaps it's not even that conversation to an audience, but what can you create by being you in the world and living by an example that way? Lots of different possibilities here. And believe it or not, you're actually already doing it just by tuning into this show and using some of these tools. How much more would you like from here? There is power in your voice. It is time to start exploring it and utilizing it to create a life that you love. Have an amazing, amazing week. And as always, I will chat with you next Tuesday.